Well, I up/downgraded to a new M4 Pro 16-inch MacBook Pro. Why did I do that? If you know anything about me, the maxed out 16-inch MacBook Pro has been my main machine since 2021. I had an M1 Max version, and then I got an M2 Max version, skipped out on the M3 Max, and I've been using that, and it's been great. But I've realized that I really don't use that laptop away from my desk. Sometimes I do, but not enough to reinvest into a maxed out MacBook Pro. It's just very expensive for the specs that you're getting. You can arguably get more with a Mac Studio, even though they've yet to upgrade that. But yeah, I just figured like if I'm going to invest in a desktop down the line when they come out with one, with an M4 Ultra or Extreme or whatever they're doing, should be good. I'd rather have a laptop that's comparable in performance to the one that I already have, which is a maxed out M2 Max one, without it being a liability and a huge cost. So I decided to settle on a pretty specced out, souped up M4 Pro model, the best you could make it with a few exceptions. And in this video, I'm going to explain why I made this decision. But before we continue here, I have a brief message from the people that made today's video possible. Level, who were kind enough to hook me up with one of the coolest, most compact and inconspicuous smart locks for your home I've ever seen and used. Meet the Level Lock Plus with Matter support, along with Alexa, SmartThings, Google Home, and most importantly, HomeKit compatibility. Installation was super simple, and the battery lives right in the deadbolt, which is just genius and makes it easy to replace. But when it comes to function, the Lock Plus really packs a punch. First up, it's 62% smaller than other smart locks, and again, doesn't really give away its smart capabilities, especially since it sports a typical keyhole, which I like a lot for analog operation. But when it comes to its digital side, it operates with Matter over Thread connectivity protocol, which lets you really easily and quickly connect to the Level app for remote control and to your iPhone, and more broadly the Home app for toggling as well. Another sick feature with the Lock Plus and the Level app is the ability to create home keys or cards to put in your Apple Wallet on your iPhone and or watch. You can also program NFC cards to do this too, which makes unlocking so much easier in a pinch or when your hands are full. All the while, the Lock Plus just comes across as a regular old but pretty handsome deadbolt lock. So what are you waiting for? Upgrade your front door or another door in your home today with Level. I'll leave a link in the video description if you're interested in checking everything out. Alright, so first let's do a little spec rundown with this laptop before I get into the rationale as to why I went with it. First up, we have the best non-binned M4 Pro chip in here, so 14-core CPU, 20-core GPU. We also have that paired with 48 gigabytes of unified memory. That's the max you can get with an M4 Pro chip in these newer MacBook Pros, paired with also 2 terabytes of internal storage, which I'll explain later, along with all the other specs. And I also have it in space black, which I quite like because it kind of resembles those black plastic MacBook Pros, so I wanted to go with something different. It's pretty sexy. And then I also got nano texture, which is just wonderful. I didn't get it with the other models that I picked up for testing and reviews, so I made sure to get it this time, and yeah, it's just wonderful. I'll talk more about it in like a long-term review, but it's really inconspicuous. You don't really notice it, but then it kicks in when it matters, when you have like a lot of glare. So again, lovely upgrade. You should definitely consider it if you care about glare on your display. I didn't know how much glare I had until, or I was experiencing until I actually had this, installed or on my display. So it is a wonderful addition. But let's get into the internal specs though. Why M4 Pro? Well, again, I've been using an M1 Max and M2 Max MacBook Pro since 2021, and those have been pretty good. I skipped M3 Max, just didn't really make sense to upgrade. And since then, CPU got much more powerful to the point where M4 Pro is rivaling M3 Max or overtaking it in some cases, and also rivaling M2 Ultra. So that's insane. I've said in my MacBook Pro reviews, the performance has sort of been pushed a tier down, like Max chip performance is now Pro chip performance, Ultra chip performance is now Max chip performance, at least CPU-wise. GPU-wise is a bit of a different story. The M2 Max still has more GPU horsepower than the M4 Pro in here, unfortunately. I just couldn't justify buying, again, a souped up one of these because I mostly use it at my desk. And again, I plan on getting a Mac Studio later. Anyway, maybe not your case, but even still, I'll say this. This packs 75% of the GPU punch as the M2 Max laptop that I have, which was way more expensive, and each individual GPU core with an M4 chip, or this M4 Pro chip specifically, is like almost 50% faster. It's 42.5%, but it's nearing 50% faster individually. So 20 cores do 75% of the job as to 38 cores from the M2 generation. So that's pretty nuts. So all of this to say, the M4 Pro chip is going to handle my more regular workflow, sort of the meat and potatoes work that I do, you know, regular multicam 4K, video editing, multi-streams of that, just fine, you know, paired with the RAM as well, which is the next portion of this video here. Why 48 gigabytes? Why not go with the Max chip or get more? Well, again, 48 gigabytes is the max you can get with the M4 Pro chip. For some reason, you can get 64 with the M4 Pro chip on the Mac Mini. Sounds like a kind of arbitrary decision to me. But anyway, 48 gigabytes is a pretty healthy number in here. It's definitely no 96 gigabytes, which is what I'm used to with the M2 Max MacBook Pro. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think that my typical workflow makes use of all of that RAM all at once. I mean, it definitely does when I'm doing weird 8K experimental stuff, but that's not all the time. And again, I plan on getting a bigger, beefier machine for that. And if I'm going to spend all that money, I may as well get 256 or whatever the crazy number will be with the M4 Ultra. But yeah, again, 48 is a pretty healthy number. 16 is the minimum that I need to have a good time casually and also semi-professionally. I can have a pretty good time video editing with my M2 MacBook Air with 16 gigs of RAM. Anything less, things are stuttering, playback is sucky. So 48 is gonna be a great time, you know? It's 32 plus 12, right? Yeah. Hold on. Oh my God. I'm sorry. It's 16 plus 32 is 48. It's late and I suck at mental math and math in general. But the reason I bring this up is you get 32 gigabytes on top of that base 16 gigs that comes with the MacBook Pro to start out with. 16 is already enough for, you know, everyday tasks and even some higher end tasks too. So an additional 32 gigabytes that can be allocated towards my workflow should be more than enough. And, you know, I'm happy with that. Also, the memory bandwidth has increased too. So, you know, this RAM may be worth more. Like 1 gigabyte of this newer RAM is worth more than a gigabyte of the previous gen RAM with the M1 and M2 Max chips. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But yeah, macOS is designed to take advantage of as much RAM as you have, which is why, again, I want to get as much as I can with a desktop machine, which is primarily what I'll be using to do anything super duper crazy and weird and high production and 8K. But for the most part, again, my workflow is just, you know, multicam 4K, you know, multiple streams of 4K, and this memory should be enough. But the question is 2 terabytes of storage enough? Why would I go with that? I've been using 4 terabytes for a while. Why didn't I go with anything higher? Well, Thunderbolt 5 is now a thing with the MacBook Pros here. Why is this important? Well, that means that you can connect, theoretically, storage that is just as fast as the internal storage in your machine. And if you know anything about video editing or any creative work, for the most part, at least intensive stuff, maybe rendering, I'll speak for video editing at the very least. It takes advantage of the fastest storage possible. Like, it doesn't sort of bottleneck at a certain point, like, oh, it only operates at 500 megabits per second. No, it'll use your max amount of bandwidth with your internal storage. So having a lot of, or in the past, having a lot of, you know, Apple's internal storage in there was important. You're paying a lot of money for it because it's super fast. But if you can connect to something that's pretty much on par, if not better, or just equal, it's better, in my opinion, to get that external storage for a few reasons. Number one, it's less expensive. I think getting 4 terabytes would have cost me $1,200. I could get 8 terabytes from OWC with their new Thunderbolt 5 external drives for the same price. So I could get double the storage for the same price. Plus, having your storage outside of your machine is kind of ideal. In my case, again, because I want to have a Mac Studio where I plug that in and operate or use that. And then if I want to go on the go, because there's definitely instances, you know, in my week or, you know, month or whatever, where I need to work on the go with something more substantial than like a MacBook Air, for example. I know multiple laptops, but this is my job. I review tech. But my point is, I can unplug that drive, plug it into my MacBook Pro, like nothing happened and not sacrifice any bandwidth, speeds, any of that. The processor and the RAM and everything will be working with the storage just as fast as it would be internally, which is fantastic. So, and on top of it being external just for the sake of switching between a desktop and a laptop eventually, it's better to have your storage external, because what happens if your machine goes, like, if your machine is broken, you don't want to have your precious data and projects, some of which I'm working on for weeks, if not months, just locked inside there. So I would prefer to kind of, you know, sort of, what's the word? Not consolidate. It's, this is what happens when you record at 3:44 in the morning. Compartmentalize is the word here. You want to sort of separate, you know, your storage from your machine, so you can just like swap it out. And, you know, if you want to use a backup machine, you can just plug that in like nothing happened. So, all in all, 2 terabytes should be enough for me, because, you know, that's enough for the base operating system, for apps, for downloads, for any of the files that I need to have always. You know, I have like sort of resources, backgrounds, you know, whatever, maybe some Photoshop files, stuff that can be well within the 2 terabyte limit. But when it comes to bigger video projects that I want to cycle out anyway, I don't want to hold on to all this inevitably. It's better to have that outside of the machine, you know, for the sake of not piling up files, and also, again, compartmentalization. You know, God forbid something happens to my machine, and, you know, because I want to eventually switch between, you know, a Mac Studio and the MacBook Pro. And that kind of brings us to the final point of this video. Again, my goal here is to use this alongside a beefier desktop computer. I would rather spend, you know, $6,000 to $7,000 on a really amazing desktop, because, you know, you're actually getting like double the performance there, opposed to this, which would cost about the same, but you'd be getting half the performance, maybe similar or a similar amount of storage, but still you would be getting half the performance CPU-wise, GPU-wise, and RAM-wise. So why not double it, especially, again, if I'm doing most of that crazy high-end work at my desk anyway. So that was sort of my rationale here. I needed a mobile workstation. I didn't want to spend $1 billion on it. I've already had that. It's great. And I maybe mentioned this, or I'll say it again, it's a liability having a $5,000 to $6,000 laptop in your bag. Plus, if it has all your stuff on it, it never felt good. Like, I really hated bringing it places. Because like I felt like, I'm like, man, if this laptop gets stolen or broken or both, like I'm screwed, like everything's gone. So, you know, I still couldn't, you know, justify, or I couldn't live with just, you know, a MacBook Air or something like that for mobile work, especially if it's serious, especially if I'm away for a couple of days or whatever. I mean, the MacBook Pro 16-inch is a proper mobile workstation with its display, with its battery life, with its connectivity, you know, the SD card reader, and the 16-inch display too. I need that. The 14-inch is just too small for my workflow. I cannot deal with that. But again, I couldn't just throw $7 billion at, you know, a MacBook Pro again. And all of this to say here, you know, especially harkening back to the downgrade, you know, keyword in the title, the fact that Apple Silicon has gotten this good to where I can sort of move to a newer platform with a mid-tier chip is just amazing, because the M4 Pro chip is that impressive with its CPU performance that is way better, and, you know, M3 Max level, M2 Ultra level, plus its GPU performance, which is, I wouldn't say exactly on par, but pretty darn close to what you're getting with the M2 Max, which is not an old chip, by the way, very expensive chip, 38 GPU cores, you know, only giving you 25% more than 20 cores with the M4 Pro. So that is crazy. So what a time to be alive. These Apple Silicon laptops are getting better and better. As I said in a previous video, the M4 chips are kind of like the new M1 Wave 2 sort of deal. Like M1 through M3 were sort of iterative. With M4, we can kind of see where things are going as the transistors get smaller, as Apple gets better at optimization and just making these chips, you know, better and better. So all of this to say, yeah, I'm very satisfied with this machine. It's a little over $3 grand MSRP, but for what you're getting here, plus the sort of modularity with Thunderbolt 5 and the RAM and the nano texture and all that, it's a fantastic value. So if you're a video editor like me, I would implore you to consider the M4 Pro model if you know your workflow doesn't require anything super crazy. And if it does, I'd recommend getting one of these and a Mac Studio. I know that sounds crazy to some of you in the audience, why would you ever have two devices? But if you're a creative professional like me and this is your lifeblood and you use these devices every single day and you need them, it's better to spend, like, I think in total this will be like a $10,000 ordeal compared to a $14,000 ordeal if I got a Mac Studio and a maxed out MacBook Pro. In that case, I wouldn't be using the MacBook Pro to its full potential, and that would be a waste of an additional, $3,000, $4,000. So I'd rather have this configuration. Hopefully that makes sense here. But anyway, that about wraps up this stream of consciousness video. I hope you enjoyed here. Check out my link to Level once again. I love that lock. It's super cool to unlock your front door with your Apple Wallet. So please check that out. It's amazing. And as always, I'm Noah, and I will catch you all in the next one.